So my name is Lance Gleasain. I work for a company called Polyglot Programming, which is actually one of my own. We're kind of a small, I guess, consultancy or whatever. Basically, I work for myself and just have one, actually, well, you'll get the joke in a second. Actually, I have another South African that works for me back in the US who happens to be my wife, so a little bit of a family thing and all of that as well. How many people were here at Rubyfuza last year? Wow, so we actually have a lot of new faces. Okay. We'll do a little bit of impromptu then. How many people here are familiar with agile software development? Okay, excellent. How many people here pair program? Okay. So a question that I've often had is, what do you do when you're working at home and you don't have a dev pair? What? Rubber duck? Well, I was thinking of this, and I was thinking about this rather, in sort of the context of diversity. And, you know, something came to mind. One day I was kind of looking over, and I saw that. How many people here have cats? And I realized something, that cats are really intelligent. Just innately, they're intelligent animals. So, you know, what if we can take extreme programming kind of to the next level? And, you know, and not only that, but we can also actually be even more inclusive by practicing interspecies programming. So here we are getting ready for a session right here. And quite often, I mean, she's my dev pair. I'll sit there, and if you ever notice how a cat will jump up on your lap when you're working? Well, you know, for me at least, she's figuring out that I'm doing something stupid, and so she's stopping me with it, basically. So if you haven't had a chance, try it. I actually blogged about it. It's kind of fun. It's fun stuff for programming. All right. Well, beyond all that, too, I'm happy to be here in South Africa. I love this place. Having a wife that's from here is kind of cool. Great country. And, I mean, there's just so much to love about this place. You've got everything from, you know, the braais are just absolutely phenomenal. Biltong. Every time I come here, I have to come back with 5 kilos of biltong. What? Mrs. Balls. The Springboks. And, of course, the South African wine. But there is kind of one other thing, too, that I've really noticed about this country, and that is, you know, I'm a geek, right? I'm a nerd, you know, I program computers all day long, watch science fiction and things like that. And I think that South Africa is like this gem that people, they don't know about. If they did, it's like this conference would have a line outside the door, people going, I want in, because, I mean, you also have District 9. Now, I've been trying to find this. I was asking my brother and sister-in-law, I'm like, can you take me to District 9 while I'm in Joburg? And they said, well, we're going to go to the township and get some meat. I'm like, all right, that's great. I want to see District 9. Come on. But, you know, South Africa also, you guys have robots. I mean, look at this, right? In the United States, we just have, like, we just have traffic lights. But, I mean, you know, and our traffic lights look like your robots, but these must be more intelligent. I mean, they would have to be. You know, now, has anybody here ever read like Ray Kurzweil or something like that? You know, where he talks about robots dreaming and things like that. So, I mean, I was wondering, is that a husband and wife robot right there? And you know, it's like to pull their home, or you know, is that like a robot family? You know, or maybe. So. This place is great. All right. But at any rate, that's not what I came here to talk about directly. I'm actually here to talk about Circuit. I thought that was a nice little thing. We're not going to talk about short circuits, but it's actually a gem called Circuit. So why? What is the need? What is it that we're actually trying to solve with this? Well, in essence, let's say that, for example, okay, you're hosting on Heroku. And I know that some people are going to flame me. They're going to be like, Heroku sucks, and it's not going to scale out as well as you need it to and all that, but let's say that you're a smaller organization, or maybe like you're an agency or something like that. You do not, and you have a number of websites, like maybe you've got honeybadger.com, thejackal.com, bees.com, something like that, and you want to host that on just one instance and just be able to easily scale it up or down, but at times you only need one server for all three of these. So it's going to look something like this. Well, that in itself is not a big deal. But let's say that you also need to do a few other things with this. Like, for example, you need to be able to quickly add new domains. You maybe want to be able to specify these domains dynamically. You don't want to have to do a code change every time you're adding a new one. And maybe you want to be able to do like arbitrary nesting with it. And this is a big one. What if you've got one application that's sitting under one Ruby web server instance, and you want to use multiple middlewares with it? How do you solve that? Well, let's see. It's going to be an interesting problem to solve. The beast at Tanagra. How many people know this, by the way? How many people here are Trekkies? Wow, only a few Trekkies. All right. I'm only going to get a few laughs on this one then. Yeah. All right, so I'll teach you guys Tanagra, and then you guys can teach me Afrikaans, because like I just know how to say, like, you know, oh, it's lekker, or something like that. Or I've been staying right now, by the way, with like my sister. So I have these two nieces, and the one's 3 years old now, and she only speaks Afrikaans, and I only speak English, so it's been fun learning English from a 3-year-old, or learning Afrikaans from a 3-year-old. All right. So let's say that we're going to solve this problem trying to use Rails. You kind of can, but you're probably going to have to do this. How many people are actually doing this in their Rails applications currently? That's good, actually, okay. So we all would then agree that that kind of sucks. But pretty much, if you wanted to be able to dynamically route things, and you're using just a straight Rails application, pretty much your only option is you're going to have to be matching something like /star to some other controller, and then from there you're going to have a really ugly DB lookup. On top of that, it's going to be, of course, Rails only, which means that if you want to use other technologies, yes, you can put some rack things in there and so on, but you're stuck with your application is going to be Rails, that's it. Which may be fine if it's the right code base. And if you want to do something like this multiple website thing with all the dynamic routing and things like that, you're probably going to have to set up separate instances if you're using something like Heroku. Now again, if you're using something like where you're actually standing up your own web servers, you've got an AWS instance or something like that, then this may not be solving the problem for you. And that's okay. Circuit is not necessarily for everybody. Okay. Now, what if we wanted to solve this with Rack? Well, we could write some Rack middleware, implement, again, some sort of a database lookup on it, and kind of reinvent the wheel. And you'll see in a second why you're reinventing the wheel. And again, if you want to use different middleware, outside of using the Rack reload, which is going to be, at least from what I've seen, kind of slow, you're basically going to have to use different instances to get any sort of speed if you've got a lot of different websites. Okay. So how many people here, that sucks. This is a fail, by the way. That's Tanagra again. It's a great, this is like totally, I can't believe you guys haven't seen this next generation. All right. We're having a whole Twitter conversation with this one before. How many people here have actually done something with Rack middleware? Okay, so we have a few of you. Now, I guess the other question I should ask here too is how many people here are what I would say beginners at Ruby? We have a few. How many people here would you say intermediate? Okay, a few more. And then I'm assuming everybody else is like, I'm an expert, I know it all. Okay, so Rack middleware, I guess, you could call it intermediate, you could call it advanced. I discovered it and started really playing around with Rack middleware a couple of years ago. But, you know, different people have different needs with it. What Rack middleware is, in essence, for those that don't know, though, it's basically, it's an application that it's basically something that you put within the stack that will intercept calls for you and do something. So right there, that right there is one of the simplest Rack middlewares that you could use. You just basically have an initialize, and technically in this example, this line right here, not needed. And then you implement a call with return array. All this is doing here, if you put this in, basically, you could put this on you could include this on a Rails application, a Sinatra application, or something else like that. And basically, this will just ruin your app because all it'll do is it'll basically give you a 404 and basically say, I don't understand in Tanagra. Gateo, his eyes closed. All right. So to kind of help some people that haven't done Rack Middleware to see a little bit more of a practical example with that one, here's a little bit of, I'm going to do a little bit of shameless pet project promotion, or rather to show you some code out of a couple pet projects that I've done with this. So one here happens to be a little project called, what is going on with my machine? Here we go. Okay. So hang on here. Okay. So one of these two is this little project that's called Reader, and let me kind of explain what Reader is. Reader, in essence, is a, it was born out of the need to, we have this, I have this one client that's doing a lot of marketing automation and analytics. And so we needed to basically have a solution out there that would, where you could include links in emails and Twitter campaigns and things like that, but then be able to track them, track it all the way back to a Sail and Magento installations, which is what they happen to integrate with. Looked out there, and we looked at the solutions that were there, and there was nothing that was just something that you could easily include in your application without like a lot of other ceremony, because there are a few other applications that will do like a URL shortener and give you redirection capability and things like that. But we wanted Mongo integration, wanted to be able to track the logs, and we also wanted to be able to include Google Analytics campaign ideas in there. And so came up with this small little piece of Rack middleware, basically. And here it is. You got your initialize here. You get access to everything that's in your environment. We're parsing some stuff out. A little bit of a wonky set of logic bits there. There's some refactoring eventually we'd like to do in this. And then basically at the end, if we found a match, you're going to do a 302, redirect at the URL, pass yourself in, you're good. We don't if it's something where they were specifying the reader URL, but we didn't recognize the rest of it, we'll give them a 404. And otherwise, and this is kind of the beauty of Rack middleware, we just basically do an app call, pass the environment, everything flows through just like the middleware was not there. It only activated, this will only activate if you actually are specifying certain URLs within your request. And you've got this installed in. Okay, and another example that we have here. So probably everybody here saw my quick lightning talk on Passbook. A lot of people did. Well, Passbook is actually, one feature of Passbook too that I kind of didn't allude to there was that you can also actually do these things called push notification updates. And so with that, what you can do is you can actually specify, like you've sent somebody a Passbook, but then you have updated information for it. Like let's say that somebody has an airline ticket Passbook, and then the flight was delayed. Apple allows you can send off a request with a push notification, and then it says, okay, that's fine. In the Passbook itself, there's a URL that you give it, which is to your website, and then you have to implement a bunch of endpoints to be able to basically allow the Passbook to be updated, because that's where the update actually occurs. And so here's an example of basically Rack middleware where we're intercepting it, grabbing information about what they're doing. Are you doing a post? Are you doing a delete? You know, what is Apple asking for? And kind of abstracting out some of the boilerplate stuff so that then somebody implementing this can just deal with the logic. And of course, as always, you can just flow through with this line right here if it's not a Passbook request. Okay, so back to the other. This is really weird. Whenever this thing is in presentation mode, it always, my command tab doesn't work. That is strange. Okay. Probably because we're in play mode. There we go. Okay, so that's Reader, that's Passbook iOS. They're fun little gems that I've written, and they're little toys I have, so check them out. Shaka, his eyes uncovered. So that means I understand, basically. A little bit more Tanagra. Okay, so circuit. That's what everybody was here about. That's what they wanted to understand. So how does Circuit solve these problems? Well, I think the easiest way to show this is, let's just show you a little. Well, in essence, I mean, the history behind it is this. We were filling the need for, the creators of this gem were basically, they needed to create a custom CMS. They wanted to be able to preload the configuration. They wanted it to be as fast as routes. They didn't want it to be Rails-based. And this thing is actually this thing is in production. And I think in general, they've got about, I want to say like at least 30 to 40,000 requests a day going through it, something like that. So it can definitely handle a load with it. All right, so what makes Circuit great? How does it work? Code example. So the first concept we have here is that, how many people here have used rackup files? Okay. This is going to look kind of familiar to those of you that have used them before. Circuit basically has this concept of a circuit rackup file. It looks a lot like a regular rackup file. Can everybody read this, by the way? Nope? All right, hang on. Let's do an on-the-fly fix of this. Let's see here. Is that completely, whoa, that is really bad. Whoa.
Can you read it out loud?
Yeah, let me try highlighting this. This is just, all right, let's see here. Is that any better? Let me see if I... All right, can we read that any better there? Okay, there we go. Let me just take that down. All right. So the first piece with it that the first thing that we'd basically implement here is a CRU file. So this is going to look a lot like a standard rackup file. And basically, the interesting thing with this one, of course, is you can require middleware just like you can on a regular rackup. And then you can have logic that you're running that's going to look a lot like when you would implement even like Rack Middleware or something else like that. So right here we have just a very simple one that's just returning a 200 content type text, OK. OK. Then the next thing we're going to have here, let me see if I can get this guy a little bit bigger. There we go. Is that kind of readable? Everybody see that? Is that a yes? OK. So then what you're going to implement is a model for a site. And basically, your site, in this case, we're using a Mongoid data store. You can, which is basically, Mongoid is a front end for Mongo. We also do support an in-memory one, though to be honest with you, I haven't really done much work with that one. I've usually just used Mongoid because that's what my projects have called for with it. You need to specify a class name that it's going to be associated with, and this will make sense in just 1 second. And you need to say that it has a root. These are just, it's kind of some wiring up that it has. There's some work long-term that making that better, a little bit less boilerplate. OK. And then you need to create a node object. Again, it's going to be a Mongoid store object. And it's basically, with both of these, basically, you're including mix-ins that are specified within Circuit to give you kind of a lot of helper methods and wire some stuff up for you. You're specifying a node, rather. You're saying you belong to site, and you're the inverse root. And then, once you've done all that, this is where Circuit gets pretty darn powerful. So, all right, we're going to have to, come on, slide. There we go. Sorry. Is that there readable to people? OK. That's going to be a little bit more scrunched up than we wanted here, but we'll just make this work. OK. So somewhere in your code, and we're doing this on console here in this example, but somewhere in your code then, what you're going to do is you're going to take that object now and you're going to instantiate it. You're going to say, okay, give it a host, which in this case we're calling it example.com, or it could be like honeybadger.com or something like that. And you're also saying give it some aliases. So in this case, we're giving it www.example.com, and you could throw as many of those in there as you want. And then basically what you do is we throw in here, we've got, you basically then create an instance of, can everybody read this here? Okay, a node. Node new, specify the site. In this case, make that a little bit bigger. In this case, we're basically making this root node, but you could put path information in there if you wanted to. And a behavior class. This behavior class right here is analogous to the naming convention that you're used to in Rails, where if you give a controller name something, underline something, then it's going to expect a class name that's camel case. And we're just kind of automatically inferring that for you in Circuit. So if you go back here, right there was your render ok.cru. And so you basically give it that file name, and then it's going to be looking for, that's what it will be looking for when you specify your behavior class. You save that node, restart the server, and that's it. By doing that now, you've hooked up a new behavior and basically a new rack endpoint in your application. So with that CRU file, you could do crazy stuff like basically you could have www.example.com using my middleware. You could have another one that uses another middleware and basically go ad infinitum with that. And for people that have kind of worked with Rack and understand what that means, that's a pretty big deal, kind of, because right now, really, the only thing that I've seen with it that you can do to get around that or to do that without Circuit is to basically use a reload, which is not the, I don't know, I personally, it's not the best thing that I've used myself with it. Now, with that being said, of course, there is one other piece of big functionality with this, and that is that you can also, built into Circuit, we also have some functionality for what's called a rewriter. So let me kind of make that big. Bring that over. Okay. So let's say that you've got an application and you've got a Rails, you basically want to send it over to, later on down the chain, to a Rails application or something else like that. Built into Circuit, you've got a rewriter where all you have to do is implement something like this, where you say, okay, bring it in, and in this case what we're doing is we're actually snagging a content ID off of this one, and we're saying, if you've got a content ID within the request, route a request to root down to contents content ID. And again, this is something where you could do all sorts of different permutations and combinations within this. This example assumes, of course, that you would also basically, you would have a site, that's a site instance with this, where you're specifying use this when you hit that base directory above. And then your routes in your Rails application might look something like, if I can get this big enough, hang on. It'll look something like that. There we go, that's readable. District 9 took over. And so, of course, that makes us happy. And we've got Dharmak and Jalada Tanagra in concert working. So, at any rate, that's pretty much what I have. Circuit, it needs you. It's an open source project. It has a small user base right now. Would love to see more people use it. Would love to be able to get Redis support in there. If anybody has a hankering to get involved on an open source project, wants to play with Redis, could use that. Would love to get active record support. Right now you can use, we support Mongo, we support in-memory We'd love to get more data backends implemented so that basically you could persist that inactive record if you wanted to and not be stuck with a Mongo instance. Riak and Goliath. Has anybody here, by the way, ever played with Goliath? That's an interesting one for sure, because that definitely is kind of more of an event machine-based implementation that allows you to do some interesting multi-threading while still working in C. And it's interesting, though, too, because actually to do the multi-threaded, you actually have to go outside of the standard rack-based nomenclature a bit. But it still looks very familiar. And of course, we'd love to get more feedback. People saying, hey, we got this bug, or this feature really sucks, you ought to do this, that type of thing. Would love to see that. And that's pretty much it. I've got stickers if anybody wants them. Oh, and would love to bring back a honey badger, too. Any questions? Sure. What? MIT. Good question. Good question. Any other questions? Okay.